Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we are looking at player props here for Monday. 2 games. One is a game 1 there for the Knicks and Pacers. The other is that Western Conference matchup of those freaking demons, the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, teams that nobody wants to play right now. Really good series going there. Definitely want to make sure to subscribe to the page. We also have another video, Best Bets, in a separate one that we are bringing you each and every day now in this postseason alongside these player props. Also want you to head to thelines.com and check out the NBA player prop tool up there so you can see all the odds available to you from all of these books that are giving us bets this NBA postseason. Nate, let's get into your first pick as we're going to Isaiah Hartenstein here.
Yeah, I mean, the look to start the series here is like, why would Mitchell Robinson be playing much? So I assume Hartenstein will get more minutes, and then the over 10.5 points is pretty good here. And I think you could sprinkle on a double-double. Maybe he will be able to wrestle a few rebounds away from his teammate, Josh Hart, who you're going to talk about. But I mean, yeah, if this is a fast-paced series, like 10 rebounds will be much easier to come by than against Joel Embiid and the Sixers in a series that was played at like a 90 pace. And I mean, not playing against Joel is the biggest factor here. I mean, first of all, the foul trouble that Hartenstein found himself in multiple times in that series, and basically Tibbs game planned around that. Like, yeah, we know you're going to be out. Like, it's okay if you use all 5 in the third quarter. Like, we have a plan for the fourth. But Mitch Rob out there, like, guarding Embiid his damnedest, despite being completely hobbled. Like, and so now you're going to put him out there on Miles Turner and expect him to go from the rim to the 3-point line and back and forth. And like, why would you do that if you're Tibbs? Like, Mitch should play a limited role here. Maybe Precious Achiuwa gets in there. I don't think Hartenstein will play the entire game, but I think he's good for about 30 minutes. The last time he played Indy on February 1st, he went for 16, 19, and 4 on just 10% usage. But in game 6, he had a 23% usage, grabbed 9 of 14 rebound chances. He was just fitting in perfectly with how teams are starting to overcompromise on Jalen Brunson. And he's a safety valve. Like, just give it to Hartenstein, let him flip that shot up, and it's usually good. And actually, Indy was the worst team defending that range, 5 to 9 feet, in the NBA on the road all season. And a little bit worse post All-Star break. Also gave up tons of attempts inside 5 feet and was pretty bad in that regard. And post All-Star break allowed the most points per game to centers, exactly because of those reasons, right? So Josh Hart, who you are talking about, only 14 rebound chances in his 3 against Indy this season. So they're a little bit better as far as keeping him off the glass. And Hartenstein had 25 rebound chances in his 2. So I just think, yeah, the minutes combined with the opportunities will make him a decent shot for a double-double, which is plus 220.
Yeah, I think the double-double plus 220 is a pretty good look too. Yeah, you hope that this is just the similar look to what we saw the last time these teams played, right? That was the game that he did the best against Indy and without Mitch Rob as well on the 1st of February. And the points, I mean, he got the 7 boards in that game and the 12 points. So like, I mean, the rebounds, it's a matter of like, are there going to be some more missed shots? I mean, during the regular season, this Indy team was the best shooting team in the league according to effective field goal percentage. But obviously this Knicks defense, right? This is going to be the fun of the series, is really like what's going to prevail here. And I think we both are leaning Knicks to prevail, especially in the playoffs when things get a lot tighter and a little bit less fluid. No matter what, you kind of would rather rely on the team that can just kind of like lock in on defense, especially. But with Hartenstein, to your point, like just everything for him is going to be minutes. I think that this is going to be way more his series than Mitch Rob's series. You don't really need Mitch Rob out there guarding Miles Turner on the 3-point line, and then everything else is going to be coming out long rebounds. And a little, maybe you want to protect the paint a little bit, but Hartenstein still was plenty fine at that. It's really about matchups more than it is like who protects the paint better at that point. Because if you leave Mitch Rob down there to protect the paint, Miles Turner standing wide open, and there's really, I mean, I guess you can put him on Pascal, but then Pascal will just do what he did to Brook Lopez, right? So there's just not really good matchups for Mitch Rob here, and I think that all kind of translates into more Hartenstein. But I'm going to start my player props here with Jalen Brunson under. Man, I hate myself, but it's an assist, and I feel better about this, just as good about this as I do as points. And I talked about this a little bit in the best bets, but I love the plus money for just the under 8.5 assists. That's really what it comes down to, rather than having to take you get a little bit of plus money, I think, for taking him 30. No, at this point, it's like a 35 point prop for him as his core for that. So I'm not scared of that, but I think that's a little bit more of going to be a little bit more of a sweat than the under 8.5 assists for him. Mostly because, I mean, this is what I talked about. This is what Indy does. They don't double off of guys. They give up points to point guards. They give up the second fewest assists per game to point guards. I was doing this with Dame last series as well, under assists. Then when Chris Middleton became the point guard, I was happy to take his under on assists, because it's not about your size or anything like that. It's just, are you the ball handler in a pick and roll that's run very consistently? And that's all the Knicks are running now in the playoffs, is the pick and roll and some handoff, by the way, some dribble handoff for Jalen Brunson as well, which is another thing that will help maybe as Isaiah Hartenstein stay in there. He's way better for that on offense for them, as sort of like standing at the foul line and helping out with Jalen Brunson as the screener and then the roller. But he gives them more options on offense. And for Jalen, like, I don't think he's going to be diming that up that much. Like, he's going to be taking those 25 to 29 shots that we saw him take in this last series, and that's going to take away from it, because that's what the defense is pressuring him to do. They're giving him that shot way more than they're blitzing the point guard and trying to take away the dimes, which is why they limit spot up shooters so well. And it's all like the same game theory that they're not leaving their guys. So there's not an imbalance in the defense ever, unless it's just the guy who's guarding the ball getting toasted, right? And then that guy's open for a little pull-up like Jalen wants, or anything inside the paint, because this is a terrible, terrible paint defense. It also gives up a ton of free throws. That's another huge reason why if Jalen is passing to guys who are cutting to the rim, because that's where this team gives everything up. They get out on the shooters. They don't let you get the spot up. Even if they are a little bit imbalanced, they're going to overpressure the spot up, which is why guys get so much stuff off of drives and so many points in the paint against this Swiss cheese defense once you get into the lane. So that's why, like, even and then once they do get in the lane, there's fouls coming as the team that gives up one of the worst free throw attempt rates to their opponent on the season for Indy. Like, then guys, that limits the ability to get those free throws. You can't get a free throw if you don't make the bucket on the and one, obviously, which is way harder to do. So I'm gonna go for the under 8.5 assists to get the plus money here, because against this Pacers team very specifically, he has way lower 3.7 assists per game this season in the three versus them, on 11.3 potential assists. And I'm sure all those potential assists, most of them were contested shots, right, on the attempted assists there. So we'll go under the 8.5.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, he's been way lower in terms of assisting at home in the playoffs with the Knicks, averaging 6 assists per game versus 7.7 on the road, and huge difference in that Philly series, partially just because the things got crazy in Philly more often, but that's the way the Knicks play at home, right? It's a black and blue, slow down, grind it out game, and assists are just going to be harder to come by. It's going to be way more iso ball. I think you dove into that pretty well in terms of why we're looking at that. So I support. So second pick here is Naz Reid, officially over 9.5 points, minus 104. I don't have much to say about it though, so I'm gonna throw out another pick, because like, what are the books doing hanging 10 points here on a guy who had a 30% usage rate, scored all 16 in the second half. Like, the first half, a little bit of nerves, a little bit of jitters, just like didn't hit his shots, and I was worried like that Finch and company would give up on him, and they were like, no, absolutely, we're doubling down. We want Naz Reid out there, especially as Ant draws more attention, to be a shooter, stretch the floor, and put it on the floor, and capitalize on the fact that like they can't put Gordon on Ant necessarily, because then Naz Reid can just like punish KCP. He's got that kind of versatile big game. I think his confidence will be very high, and 10 points is a very low number for a guy who, again, had 30% usage in his 23 minutes in game one. So also like Mike Conley here, who also had a poor first half and then came out and did well. So over 16.5 points and assists is where I would go here. I don't hate adding 4 rebounds, but I think that's a bit hit or miss. I mean, sure, there could be some regression here because he had 10 assists on 10 potential assists in game one, but he also had 11.4 potential assists in this series last year. He had 20 more passes in last year's series than the next highest guy, Ant, on this team. Now, I don't expect him to be the one running things primarily. I expect it to be Ant, but I don't expect Denver to just try to guard Ant in single coverage anymore either, because that was a disaster. So there's going to be a lot of secondary assist opportunities for Ant Edwards, swinging it out to Conley and having him either make a three, get in the lane for his floater, which he can still hit, or kick it out and have more potential assists on that. And then there's the other thing, which I mentioned as like a lean in game one here is that Jamal Murray's not healthy enough to guard, too. And I don't know if he's a good individual defender, even when he is healthy.
No.
Because, yeah, Conley had actually scored 10 plus in 13 straight regular season matchups against Murray. Now in 5 of 6 in the playoffs, he's averaging 13.2 points, 7.8 assists, and shooting 48% against Murray. In his last 3, that's up to 13.3 and 9 assists in 38 minutes per game. And I mean, in the regular season post All-Star break, he averaged 20 PRA in 28 minutes. So if you just do the simple thing of per 36, he's about 25 PRA. This number's a little too low based on those just averages. And then you factor in some of the matchup stuff that I talked about where I think he'll get plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. I like it too. I mean, both these dudes were, I think popular picks for game one, and then they came out and made a lot of people pucker up, and then they came through in the second half, and Mike Conley went unconscious. But what I talked about in the first video too was I think both these dudes had average games, the right around what you would expect from them, not necessarily going way over just because the second half was so impressive. They just waited for one 24-minute period to do all of their damage versus really getting going in the first half. And that was a huge reason why it was a 85-point total in the first half there that it ended with, was in part because the others for Minnesota just hadn't come along yet, which only exacerbates how insanely good Ant was in that first half. Plus, Karl Towns at least was really good on offense for lack of anything else, but obviously he can't stand the floor. So I like both these guys. I love that Naz Reid requires no explanation other than they're going to keep needing him. We already talked about this, and I don't know why this went up by 1 point to your point here. So I'm going to get into Josh Hart, and I saved it for last because I don't know if I could keep going on after having to talk negatively about Josh Hart, but I am going under. I'm not as afraid of the PRA. Obviously, this man can get rebounds at will, and I think that but it's still just not a good series for him. I'm going to go under on the points and assists because I really like the under on the points as much as anything. It's the 14.5 is the core points prop. But I'm adding it to a couple of things. And really, I was ready to do this with Josh Hart because I was all over, before they moved his rebound prop up to like 12, 13.5, even in one game in the last series. I was ready to go to all those overs. That was a perfect series for Josh Hart to get all of those stats, including spot up stuff, including rebounds, especially. And he got assists here and there. He's a little bit harder to project with the dimes, but I like adding it all together here. The thing about the points is he's spotting up. He spot up more than anybody else on the Knicks, more than OG, who apparently now is somewhat of an ISO player and took a bunch of mid-range stuff in this last game because he had a height advantage over his defender and because he was going to the rim but didn't want to go all the way to the rim when Joel was in there. And I don't think he's going to be scared of that in this one, but I still think Josh Hart being their primary spot up guy at this point and playing 44 minutes basically in each game at this point, like that is not something that's available against this Pacers team. It's once again correlated to Jalen Brunson going under on assists because the spot up shooters aren't going to be there for him to dime up. And with this Josh Hart stuff on the season, like against this Indy team, way worse stats than he has, especially against Philly, but really everybody. Versus Philly in 10 games this season, he's at 16 points a game, 13 rebounds, and about 5 dimes. So that does put you right at 33 points, rebounds, and assists. Great. I mean, that's what he gets against that team. This is not what he gets against this team or the rest of the league. And if you look at his numbers since the All-Star break, which I think is the sample you need to use because Jay Randall was down and you finally got OG back at one point. So now it was the best iteration of like this team, or most comparable iteration of this team, was the ones that played like the team that played the last 30 minutes for this Knicks squad, the last 30 games for this Knicks squad of the season. And in that time, he had 12.5 points per game, 11 rebounds per game, and about 5 assists per game, 4.5 assists per game in that time frame as well. Had a couple of huge dime games in there too, where he was assisting out his butt, but still pretty well below 33 or 32.5 PRA, or even 20.5 points and assists that he would need there. Still at about 17 points and assists combined in that time frame, and that includes 3 of those games against Philly, by the way, in the regular season. I didn't even take those out. I just left them in and was like, it's still just way lower than when he plays against Philly. And this matchup is going to be so much different. It's going to be Aaron Nesmith way more than it's like who guarded him in the last series. He was just a forgotten man, right? They were in the last game, Buddy Hield guarded him more than anybody, alongside Kyle Lowry and Campaign. Those were his main defenders, and that was consistent throughout the playoffs and the series. Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey got mixed in there in the bunch of dudes guarding Josh Hart, but they didn't have just like one person to be like, yo, don't let this guy get rebounds and kill us on the offensive boards, which seems like it would have been a better play than just like letting him run free like a free safety and do what he wants. So with Aaron Nesmith on him It's going to be way different, man. That dude is a prototype for defending somebody like Josh Hart, a little bit longer and taller than him, but just as fast and athletic and willing to get out into the open court and run. And that's going to keep him a little bit more at bay, I'm pretty sure. So I'll throw in the under 20.5 PA here, but if you add the rebounds at 12.5, I would not be shocked if in a couple games that's at 10.5 rebounds for Josh Hart, because it's just a little bit less available. The whole thing about rebounding against Embiid was everybody on the Knicks just needed to worry about Embiid, and Josh Hart was free to go be his rebounding self and pick up those loose balls that just landed on the floor because none of the big men actually picked it up out of the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's a completely different matchup. This Pacers team is much quicker to the ball, much more athletic and young, and Obi Toppin should see a lot of run, and he's not that easy to sky over at all. Do you think they'll put Neesmith on Brunson, though? I mean, they'll probably start with Nembhard. It might go back and forth, but to get some more length on him. In any case, like I don't think Hart has an easy time getting points and assists, but that is a reason to maybe be concerned about the rebounds, is that, he might not be matched up on Neesmith.
It's a good point. We can see if that how that shapes up for sure. It's going to be a better matchup than whoever it was for Philly, obviously. But yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how Rick Carlisle plays that with the way that he starts that team, because Aaron Neesmith would be, it is their best wing defender on the starting lineup. Now Nembhard has been really good, and maybe they have Nembhard try to tire out Brunson by being the dude that picks him up 94 feet. He was doing that with Dame a little bit, then Dame got hurt, and they didn't really have to stick to that anymore. But he was doing that to Dame as a way to slow down Dame. So we might see that. And if he gets cooked though early, you're not wrong. Like he's going to be trying different stuff. So we'll have to pay attention to the matchups for sure. But that is all the time we have for you in Play at Props. So continue to follow along. Subscribe to that page. Also got the best bets up for you for Monday's slate here. And until we see you next, happy betting.